When did you know, because you guys were growing kind of slowly at first, when did you know, like, we can start scaling this thing quicker, like we can start turning it up? We've got the things in place. Was there some sort of tipping point for you to realize that?
I think it was the point where we brought franchise development in-house because actually we hadn't mentioned that yet, but when we first started, we were outsourcing our fran dev. So we had a broker, not an independent broker that was commission only, and then we had a third-party kind of development organization that was helping us sell the franchises. But we were getting to a point where that third-party development organization wasn't sort of ingrained in our culture and our day-to-day. They didn't really know our franchise owners. They didn't really know, our support team. And so they were sort of selling, I guess, the sizzle, as Omar called it. And then once we were able to bring it in-house, there was a little bit of a lull, but then I think it just kind of, it slingshotted upwards because we kind of had all the pieces of the puzzle marching in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it was that. I think also the unit economics. Mm-hmm. So the combination of those two things, having profitable franchisees and then having the development team that could then blow it out of the water. And that's when those two things came together. That's when the tipping point happened.
Oh, yeah. Now, franchise development, do you guys still have in-house fran dev?
We do.
All right. So you're starting a franchise tomorrow, just knowing what you know. You're bootstrapping it. Maybe you have 5-6 franchises. Do you do fran dev in-house? Do you use an FSO? What do you do?
I think if we're bootstrapping it, I would probably use an FSO, franchise sales organization, because you're paying on a commission basis. You're, on aggregate, you're going to overpay, but it's okay because they're helping you fill the boat with qualified franchise owners, hopefully. And then if you can get to a point where then you can then afford bringing it in-house. But if you were trying to bring it in-house from the beginning, and then if it fails, that's going to be a costly mistake.
Mm-hmm. But if you had investors and cash wasn't an issue, you would prefer in-house fran dev, you think?
I think so. If you've got the right people, the right culture, and the right leadership, and as Omar said, the right unit economics.
What do you think?
This is where you need the FSO sponsor just to, it's like, hey, rep them right here.
Right. What do you think?
I agree. Yeah, I think if I was bootstrapping, the FSO for sure, because it's low risk. Yes, you're going to overpay. But if you can truly, if money wasn't an option and you could really do what you wanted, then sure, you'd want to have an in-house team that's all in on your culture and your system.
But I think that in the early days of franchise sales, it really does boil down to the culture and to some degree the sizzle of what it is that you have to offer. We had a catchy name, bright colors, good PR, purpose-driven, values-based organization. People wanted to be a part of that. And then the rocket fuel, as Omar mentioned, is when our franchise owners started really making real money, buying vacation homes, putting their kids through college, buying that, luxury car, and prospects wanted to be a part of that. So it was a combination of, okay, that's a great organization, great culture, and I can make a pretty amazing living doing that. That's a recipe for rapid growth.
What about on the broker side? When we were all starting out in the 2000s, it was easy for brokers to want to work with us. Now, because of all the brands that are out there, it's harder for a startup.
Yeah, I remember when we first started trying to get into the broker networks, we almost went broke paying to be part of their conferences, and then paying to be part of their network, and then paying to try to attract their attention by buying the steak dinners or sending them gifts and all this sort of, and it took quite a while for us to get any of their attention. If I were an early stage franchisor, I don't think that you could afford that, because the brokers are going to go where the deals are, path of least resistance. They're going to go where they know deal flow is getting done, either because they've gotten them done before, because their peers are getting them done, and they don't want to also show something that's brand new if they don't know for sure it's going to work out well. And so those would be my thoughts there.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's a necessary evil, not to say that the brokers are evil, but it's something you sort of have to do. But they're taking a big chunk of it. They're not necessarily ingrained with the culture, but if you're starting out, I think you want to try to find ways to stand out away from the brokers. Plus, it's gonna be hard to get their attention, to Nick's point. It's hard to break through.
It takes quite the investment today with the broker groups to get, not only for them to get their attention, but for them to thoroughly understand your concept.
Yeah, right.
But I still, when somebody comes up to me and tells me they're thinking about buying a franchise, some type of franchise, I oftentimes will refer them to consultants or brokers because, if somebody's thinking about what they want to buy and they don't, all they're doing is online research, it'd be nice to have somebody kind of walk them through and show them a bunch of different options that meet their criteria, personality wise and investment wise and, those sorts of things. So it's, I think it's an important piece, and the brokers, especially the ones that do a great job, spend a ton of time investing in lead generation and trying to present the right opportunity for their clients, not just, whatever's going to pay them the most commission.
I want to move on to when you guys kind of got to this tipping point though, because you're saying early, Omar, that, you're selling 6 franchises, 6, 7, you get to 40. And then what happened? Why did it happen? How did it happen?
Yeah. Well, I think it was a combination of the unit economics, the franchisees that were buying the vacation homes and were making money and happy, bringing the franchise development in-house. All of a sudden, those two things collide, and then now we have the money to be able to professionalize our team. Nick mentioned our current brand president who came on as a financial controller and moved up to now essentially running the company. So it was a perfect storm of a lot of good things happening that all came together, and we followed the traction model, the EOS model. That is also another thing I'd have to sort of add into the mix. All of those things combined is really what was the rocket fuel for the brand.
Yeah, I think it's that building of the momentum, the Jim Collins flywheel. When in the early days we're pushing it, it's inching forward ever so slightly, and eventually it starts making a full rotation, but it's still requiring a ton of effort, ton of energy, time, money, bandwidth, and then eventually it starts to move a little bit faster, and then all of a sudden it's kind of spinning on its own, and then as the founder we can kind of help facilitate the growth, but we're not having to push every single lever.
Yeah. Why do you guys think so many franchisors start out and they exit? They don't stay with it.
The quote that stands in my head is persistence. The movie The Founder about the Ray Kroc, founder of McDonald's, I think it was played by Michael Keaton. He's got this monologue towards the end of the movie where he talks about, the key to success is persistence. And that's obviously the original kind of blue chip franchise system that we can always, reflect on from a century ago. And I think, franchisors maybe get into it kind of like we did with a little bit of, naive about how easy it's going to be, or, hey, my, local business is tough, but if I franchise, I'll be able to collect royalties and it's passive income. And, but then they get into it and they realize, okay, this is hard. We're not making real money until we get 50 or 100 franchises. We're having all these headaches and friction with our early stage franchisees. And so, maybe they just don't have the resilience or persistence to push through.
I mean, it's exactly that. I think business is hard. That's what it comes down to. It's very, very hard. Not to overdo the sports analogies, but they're looking at an NBA team. For every one of those guys that are on the team, there's 10,000 others that didn't make it. They might have had the talent. They might have, had everything for them, but they just either weren't in the right place at the right time, or had the wrong coach, or a million things can derail.
One bad decision.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, business is hard. Franchising is harder. You have to be focused. And first off, I think proving the unit economics. So a lot of folks get ahead of their skis trying to open franchises. The one thing we had going for us is our corporate store was profitable. So we weren't opening franchises without the cash flow of that one corporate store in DC. So you've got to prove it out, at least in one market. I'd say even open 2 or 3 markets as corporate entities, and then prove it, and then start franchising. Don't start franchising unless you have that cash flow.
Omar, that can't be overstated enough. I think too many franchisors, right? They start out and they may have one location. Maybe they sell it. I did that. I don't recommend that. But then all of a sudden the pressure becomes selling franchises to keep the lights on.
We were self-funded, but what funded us was that location in DC was the bank for us. Yeah. I mean, that was
that funded our personal lives.
Everything.
That funded the franchisor entity until it was sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So how many company-owned locations did you have in the beginning? Did you have
The beginning, one.
You just had the one.
Yeah.
Did you open up additional company-owned locations?
Today we have 4.
Yeah.
And then we do have a thesis of expanding and opening additional corporate locations in select geographies in the next coming years.
Okay.
Now that we've got some infrastructure to support that. But in the beginning, it was just the one. We put a GM in place to kind of run it and oversee the day-to-day while we focus a lot of our energy, most of our energy on bringing in new franchises and supporting those new franchises and bringing in the team members to help do that as well.
What is your thoughts on the balance between company-owned locations and franchising and the franchise or franchisee relationship when you start opening company-owned locations?
You know, I think that you want to treat the independent, or you want to treat the corporate locations no differently really than a franchise location as far as the expectation of performance, as far as the unit economics,
Paying royalties.
as far as paying the royalties out of it. And so what you really want to achieve in franchising is aligned interests. And so if there's conflict of interest, or in some cases even perceived conflict of interest, that's something that needs to be kind of addressed and kind of nipped in the bud, or at least evaluated to make sure it doesn't manifest into something bigger. But I think we've leveraged our corporate stores as a net benefit for the franchise system, because if we're wanting to pilot test something, we can pilot test it in a corporate store, prove out the success of it, and then present the results to the franchise system to say, hey guys, we spent all this money on these things here. It's working. Now we're going to recommend that you guys do it as well. And it's not going to cost you all the learning curve that we invested, the R&D that we invested. So I think that's where the benefit could come through.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in the early days, we were very bullish that we didn't want to have any corporate stores, aside from the one. But over the years, we've started, I don't want to say make it a 180, but we're certainly shifting the thesis that having a good number of corporate stores is actually a net positive, because of all the reasons that Nick mentioned, because that it increases the enterprise value of the brand. It's a great way to our building leaders story to be able to move people into those positions, and it just gives you a great sort of control of the brand and the business.
Yeah, I think there, while there's mixed reviews on having that dual strategy, I do agree with you guys. I think that there is benefit there, especially using it as potentially a farm system of raising talent, because especially if you're trying to really promote within, I think that offers you the opportunity to do that, where people are firsthand working in those territories. Strategically, I guess, deciding on where to put these company-owned locations, and that's I'll leave it up to you guys. We'll leave it out of this show. I did the company-owned thing a little bit with I9 Sports. Didn't work out perfectly for us, but I see that it definitely has merit for sure.
Yeah, I think the key is as you just described, location and personnel.
Yeah.
Who's going to be running it and where's it based. But in your business model and our business model, it's a little bit trickier because we don't have a 4-wall retail store that people are coming into, and so it's not as simple as just dropping a manager in there to manage those 4 walls and the people within it. In our business, we're sending our people out in a truck with wheels, out into the community, going to people's homes. In your business, you're going out to fields and courts and, running leagues. And so there's a little bit more variability in the model, where in some cases having somebody who's an owner actually, you would think, has more skin in the game or more of a vested interest in how it performs. But if we can, which we're attempting to do in our corporate models, create a similar owner-like mentality with our managers, we think it could work out.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.